So great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, I have all the way from Barcelona, AMIR SALIHEFENDIĆ. I practiced it and then I didn't get it right. I apologize, AMIR.
I think you got it pretty right, yeah.
SALIHEFENDIĆ. It's supposed to roll more off the tongue. But okay, so AMIR, you are the founder and CEO of Doist, which is a fully remote company with over 70 people in 25 different countries. And you are the builders of two very popular apps, Todoist and Twist. We're going to talk about that. But what I want to start with is the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Yeah, so first of all, it's awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the show. And regarding like my virtual workspace, I have like all the freedom to work from anywhere I want. But I think that I really like is kind of having my own office space. So I have like a personal office inside a co-working space. And that kind of like lets me separate like home and work. And then also like when I go into the office, I know that I need to focus on work, and it kind of just like makes the switching much easier. Yeah, I mean, I have like before, I sometimes like work from home, but it's very, like it's not that often, like maybe once per week or something like that. Or like I sometimes also do like coffee shops, but that's also not really that often. What I really want to do is like, I want to go into like my space and just, focus on the work. And then after I'm done, I just like quit and I don't really work anymore. Yeah. I mean, in the early career, like when I started out, I have actually only been a remote worker. So I have never actually worked in an office environment.
Oh, lucky. Some might say.
Yeah. But in the beginning, like I lived in a dorm with a lot of other students. And then I switched and worked from like my own apartment. And that was like really, really destructive because like there was no, like separation between like work and like life. And I would actually just like overwork because, you don't really know what you need to do. And then like work for me is kind of like I really am very passionate about my job. So I can kind of work a lot if I want to. So, this is kind of like a block for me to kind of like create this separation. Yeah.
Okay. And so what kind of, and what does your setup look like? Do you have a bunch of monitors? Do you have special headsets? What does your setup look like in your co-working space?
I usually work with like external monitor and external keyboard and a mouse. Yeah, but I also enjoy just like working from a laptop. I recently got like a MacBook 16-inch, which is the new MacBooks. And they are like really, really nice. And you don't really actually need an external screen to really be productive there. Yeah. And then I also use like noise canceling headphones from Sony. I'm kind of like a fanatic of noise. I have like a bunch of them.
Ooh, okay.
But yeah, so Sony are kind of like the best ones. And
over
I have
the
like
Bose?
yeah, for me at least. Like I also have the Bose. Yeah. So, and I also have like the AirPods Pro, which are also like noise canceling. So actually, there's a lot of like tools to cancel noise, and this is especially like useful if you are kind of in co-working environment that is very noisy.
Okay, I was going to say, so what's important about noise canceling for you? Like, what is it that you need, that you like about it? Besides, of course, background noise, but is it that you need it to be quiet when you're working, or do you get overstimulated by noise, or what's important for you about that?
Yeah, I really dislike like noise and a lot of co-working space. I'm not sure like if you have worked from a co-working space, but people really don't respect, like that you have like people sitting around you that are trying to like focus. So they have like, calls and they just like speak loudly or something like that. And that like really affects my like focus.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Now, you are the founder and CEO of Doist, which a lot of people out there that are listening to this podcast are going to know about. So I'm super excited to have you on this show. And I'd really like to talk about your company. So I read that it's a fully remote company. You've got over 70 people in 25 countries. First, tell us, what does Doist do? Tell us in the products that you have, the Todoist product, which is a productivity product like project management, and Twist, which is more of a communication product. So first, I say, tell us about your company, and then tell us about your products, and then we're going to get into why you work the way you do.
Yeah. I mean, like our kind of like goal and mission is kind of like invent the workplace of the future. So, like for the workplace of the future, you really like need communication, and then you need to organize yourself. So those are like two of like the really hard problems that we are tackling, and we're kind of like trying to tackle it from kind of like first principles thinking. So like, for instance, like Twist is like asynchronous tool that's kind of like built, for remote teams, like fully distributed remote teams that work across many time zones. And on the market, there's actually nothing really that is like Twist. Yeah. But of course, like, most teams and companies aren't fully distributed yet. So we are kind of like, living in the future and like building for the future. So that's at least like how I like to think about it. And Todoist is really like, a to-do app, but it's like more to actually like manage your work and manage your life. And you really have a system for that. Yeah. So that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. So now, why did you start this company? What was it that motivated you to do this?
I actually started this, like I built Todoist for myself in 2007 as a student. Yeah, so I actually, like, I didn't start this like I'm going to start a company. I started this, I have a problem, like, which is basically like I want to create like an amazing to-do application that can kind of help me manage my life and my work. And that's what I did. And so afterwards, it's kind of like, we have built like a company around that, and we also like built Twist. And Twist is the same thing. It's kind of like we are basically solving our own problem, which is basically like communication across like many different time zones. Like we have, I don't know, like 25 different countries, a ton of time zones, and you can't really like real time communicate that easily. And you need to have like modern ways of communicating. Yeah, so for instance, like we actually adopted Slack in the beginning, and we built Swiss because Slack does not really work that well like across time zones.
Okay, so let's dive into that, because time zones are a problem that plague teams all. I mean, I get asked every presentation I give, I get asked about time zones, and I always say it's a hard problem because it's a physics problem. We simply can't squeeze the world closer together. What are some of the ways that your team manages time zone problems?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like our culture. It's like asynchronous. So this means like when you actually like do post something, you do like a big post where you kind of like outline everything, the whole problem and like the asks that you have and stuff like that. And that's like one core aspect is basically like you need to move towards like asynchronous communication. Like you can't really communicate in real time. And when you communicate, it kind of like needs to be deep and thoughtful. So the same thing is kind of like when you're responding, that also needs to happen. So that is like kind of one thing. And the second thing is maybe like having self-managed people that can actually like unblock themselves or like work on multiple things at once, because in this environment you'll get blocked, you'll get stuck, and you just can't say now I'm stuck, I can't really work on anything else. You kind of like need to figure out like what can you do instead while you wait for an answer. Yeah, so I mean, I think those are probably two of the biggest things, but there's probably a lot of more that are related to this.
So you guys have focused then on rich communication, like really giving context and outlining the problem, and then providing also thoughtful answers, and then also hiring self-managed people who, when they hit a roadblock, they're like, okay, I'm going to go on to task B, and as soon as the people wake up for task A, I'll get back to that. So then that begs the question of, how do you find self-managed people? How do you know that they can self-manage when you're during the hiring process? Is it luck? or is there something particular that you ask people or test people on?
I mean, honestly, I think like hiring is probably the hardest thing that you can do, and it does not really become easier. Like even right now, like when we actually do a job posting, like we get like for some job posting thousands of applicants.
Wow.
But it's still like it's, you know, we need to kind of find the right person, and that is like really, really tough. But there's kind of like some indication that can use here, like personal projects, for instance, or like if they have actually built something on their own. Those are some like pretty good indicators that, you know, like people can actually like be self-starters and like self-managed and like self-motivated. Like if you can do that for your own project, then you can most likely also do it for some of our stuff. So that's just like one indicator. Of course, like you can't just like discriminate people and say like if you haven't done any personal project, then suddenly like you won't get hired. But at least like some of our best people that we have hired have kind of had that profile, you know. Yeah. So that is one thing. Another thing is maybe freelancers as well. Like some also other people that we hired is basically people that, you know, worked as freelancers and had to actually find like clients, work for them, coordinator work. It's basically, you know, like remote work is kind of like freelance work, but you just have one client,
Right.
Yeah. So those are also some good indicators. Probably a bad indicator is like if you only have worked in an office environment and you think, you know, like remote work is kind of like, you know, being on a beach, drinking, you know, pina coladas and working a bit, then you will have a wake up call, because like that isn't really the reality. Yeah.
That's what we like to say it's like, but
Yeah,
the reality is different. Like I'm out of my pajamas, but yeah. Okay. So then on your team, so very interesting. I really like the idea of people who have personal projects or people who are freelancer or people who are freelancers, because you at least understand the mindset of needing to organize your day and needing to organize your tasks in order to accomplish something. I'm very curious about what you struggle with on your team of 70 people. What's something you said, you mentioned communication, which is why you build Twist, but like, what are some of the things that Doist struggles with just sort of on a regular basis? It can't all be roses, right?
Well, we don't have any issues. That's everything is perfect. We are going to sell the dream, like.
If you have the silver bullet, I've got an audience who's ready to buy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like there's a lot of issues and problems, especially like as you hit scale and as you become more and more people. Like for instance, like communication becomes harder. Shared like vision becomes harder. And then maybe even organization becomes harder. Like you just have like a lot more like moving parts and a lot more like synchronization needs to happen, and that makes things much more complicated.
Yeah.
So something that we really struggle with for a lot of time, and I think we have only now kind of unblocked it a bit, is basically like getting stuff done with a lot of people. Like when we were most productive, we were probably like around 20-30 people. And then we hired maybe doubled our headcount, and we actually got less things done. So like getting the machinery up to date, the processes up to date, and like really figuring that out, that is really, really tough. So we actually struggled for this like for maybe a year or two, where we just kind of had to figure it out, like how do we actually get more done with more people. So maybe that's, I don't know, it's like if that is intuitive or not, but a lot of times actually hiring extra people, it doesn't really make work go faster. It sometimes like it goes slower, because you have like more people providing input, more people discussing stuff, more people that need to be aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you say, that there's a lot of moving parts. Like all of a sudden, like with 20-30 people, you can coordinate pretty well, because it's not, it's manageable in terms of just, you can oversee it in your head, most people. But once you start to get like more than that, I would even say like that's pretty impressive that a group of 20 or 30 people can align so well. And once you start getting more than that, I can imagine it just increases the chaos and stuff. So what were some of the experiments that you guys did to try and fix this?
I mean, honestly, like we tried a lot of stuff. Like we are not really afraid of trying stuff, but like most of it didn't really work. Unfortunately, yeah.
What's something that didn't work? I don't know if you can think of it off the top of your head. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what's something that didn't work that you thought would?
Yeah, so I mean, I can give a really great example, and I think like a lot of people will probably have this. Like, you read a great book on OKRs. There's a one like that's written by John Doerr, and we have also done that. And like, we are going to have OKRs, and like OKRs basically going to like solve all of our issues. And then like we rolled out OKRs, and like it was much more chaotic. It didn't work at all. Like people were like very bad at actually like setting the OKRs, like following them, updating them. And yeah, so that's like one thing is kind of like the OKR system. Like maybe, that can work for like Google. But our experience with that is basically like it didn't work at all. Yeah.
Okay, very curious. I had the same experience, by the way. Our team also tried OKRs and we failed miserably. We tried for years. We really hung on to it for years. We were so convinced it was the right way because theoretically it sounds really good. Like the theory behind it is awesome. Maybe we needed some sort of a coach though. So then what's something that you tried that did work?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I think something that's like very important is kind of like just understanding contexts and also, like the environment, maybe like the people that you have and stuff like that. So I don't actually think like maybe something that works for Doist will not work in your team. Yeah, but like something that has really worked for us, it's kind of like this squad notion and working in cycles.
Okay. Could you
So
describe that a little bit?
yeah. So basically, I mean, but our system is kind of like insanity. Like I would like
It's okay. I think people just want to hear like what is it that you tried and how does it look for you? It doesn't mean that they're going to copy you, right? It's just like they just want to hear like, okay, show us your insanity and then they'll feel better about theirs.
Yeah. So I mean, when I tell this to other founders, they're like, "What are you doing? Like this does not really make sense." But the thing is, like, we work in cycles, so this is kind of like a new trend where you basically like allocate like 1 month, or like some companies do it like 6 weeks, for instance, buffer. And then you basically have like a cycle of 6 weeks where you plan work for that cycle, and there can be like some mini project that you want to do on that, or some like long-term project that actually take multiple cycles. So that is something that I think is like very, very powerful, because people kind of like a start and end date, and like that you kind of have like these planning sessions, and you also have like a check-in like every month or like every cycle where you kind of just like do a status check on things and see like how are things going. Because if you don't have that and you just like have never-ending projects, then like you just like add more and more to the like scopes, and then suddenly like something that should take maybe a few months takes like years. So we have been in that boat, like where we work just like on projects, and we didn't have like a time specification, and maybe we had like a deadline, but like that deadline can easily move and stuff like that. But like cycle is kind of like, okay, in this cycle I want to achieve this, and like everybody inside the company plans and does that. So this is quite powerful. And the thing where we kind of like are different from like some other companies like Buffer or like Spotify are kind of like the squad. They have fixed squads. So this means like you work with the same people every cycle. With us, we have like dynamic allocation. So every squad is kind of like different people. So this means like you work with a lot of different people. And of course, like this isn't really that effective, but it kind of like teaches you, how to work in a very dynamic environment, and you kind of like need to adapt every cycle to the new environment. So and then also we have like squad leadership, so anybody inside a company can become squad leaders and lead the squad. So the way that we efficiency kind of goes down, because it's much more efficient to be like a fixed team and work on stuff than like be a dynamic team. But we kind of train people towards like dynamicness, and like just being able to change quickly, like environments and people they work with, and also like leadership. So,
I love the
yeah.
idea actually, because to me it sounds like, like I would love to lead a project sometimes, but I don't want to lead a team for the entire year, for example. But like I might be interested in a few projects here and there. And I also love the idea of this dynamic allocation, because you put specific people on a problem to solve that, depending on what the best people are for that problem. And then for the next problem, you pick the next group of the best people that can solve that problem. So I love that idea. I think it's sounds very modern, probably hard to organize, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think like it also requires like specific people, because like this, I mean, there's like some really hard things about this. Is basically like you have to have people that are very adaptable, and most people aren't really that. Like most people would actually prefer to just like work on one domain, with a set of people, and then you kind of like build these bonds and this tribe mentality. Yeah, so
It could also
I
work the other
understand.
way, right? Like it could work like there's people that you don't like working with, but you could be like, oh, it's just for this project, so it's okay. I can handle it for the next 6 weeks. And then after that, we don't have to work anymore. I mean, that can also be a good thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like we have stuck with this. The thing is, like, we still need to kind of like prove that it's a better way. But I fully understand, like, why most other companies actually prefer like fixed squads over dynamic squads. But for us, I mean, we kind of like want to have people that like are very adaptable and like can change, and are not really stuck in like one domain or like one specific problem. Um, and that also, like, I think leads to more happiness, because people never get bored. Like, you in our environment, like, you just get thrown into many different problems. Like, you never feel like stuck in something. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds yeah, for the right kind of person, it sounds like the perfect environment. But of course, you have to find the kind of person that would enjoy this kind of environment. So probably really good to look at freelancers who are used to sort of hustling and changing projects and doing this. So I can see why you went on that. Now, you've said before in a number of different articles and in interviews that I've been listening to, that you guys use asynchronous communication to your advantage. So we've already touched on a little bit about the importance of asynchronous communication, because you're a global team, so not everybody's going to be online at the same time, and that when you need to provide context, and so that you're providing sort of these rich context-filled posts, so that when you're doing asynchronous, that people don't have to guess or wait for what you mean, so that you're really writing the full thing. How are you teaching people to work in this way, to take more time and to pay more attention to their asynchronous communication? Are you hiring for that, or do people just understand when they start working for you? Is there some sort of a team agreement that you have? How do you get people to really be good at asynchronous communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like two things here. Like, first is maybe like using asynchronous tool and like having like a base that's kind of like asynchronous first, and like Twist is kind of like that. So that's why we kind of build it, and it uses like different, design patterns that kind of like promote, thoughtful communication instead of like one line communication. So I think it's probably like, you need to use the right tools, and like even email can actually work like this. The problem with email is really like that, you don't really have like a shared history, and also it can easily become like distracting. That you get like an email from outside, like you want to work on a specific project or whatever, and then suddenly like you have spam email, like something just like blocks your focus, and then like suddenly you're gone like somewhere else. That is like one aspect that I think, like, using the right tool for that, and that for us is like very important. The second thing is also, like, I think writing is kind of like a core skill of remote work, and maybe work in general, because it's based like conveying ideas, and you need, like, we actually test everybody for writing skills, because it's kind of like, the baseline is communication, and like you need to be really, really good at communicating. And our baseline is also like written communication. So you really need to be able to express your ideas like in written form.
And do you have just one language on the team, or are there multiple languages?
I mean, it's like maybe 90% English, but like everything that's kind of like written down is English. But sometimes like we have like Russian developers. I don't think like between them they actually speak English. I think they prefer or like we have also Portuguese and stuff.
Oh, sure. I mean, anybody with their own language speaking to somebody else in their own language, of course, you're going to speak your tongue.
Yeah, exactly. But like everything that's written is kind of like in English. Yeah.
Okay. And do teams at Doist have some sort of team agreement with each other? Like, here's how we're going to work together. Or is it sort of an informal, as you come onto the team, you feel how you're going to work, or you get shown how you're going to work together? Do you have anything formal in place?
I mean, we have like the cycle system that I talked about. That's kind of like global for the whole company, and also like how we allocate and focus and stuff like that's also global. But how teams actually work, like the tools that they use, the processes they use, the meetings they do, like it's really up to them. So like some teams, like our Windows team, does like Agile, Scrum. And some other team like Android does not do that at all, and we don't really like do any imposing stuff. And like our design team as well, like works very differently, and we just like let people optimize their work environment for like their job type and like their personality. Yeah.
Do you have anybody that ever takes advantage of this kind of working that you've hired? That they I don't know, they say they're going to do something and then they don't, or they say they've got a particular skill or they don't, or do you weed them out pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I think like something that's like very important is basically like building the culture, and then like having the culture also like be the enforcer. So if like somebody doesn't really fit inside the culture, like it's really easy to spot, and like people will flag this, and then like we will depart with the person. Yeah, so I would say that it's kind of like it's not really like done by process, it's more like done by people. Like
Okay.
if you work with somebody and like they communicate poorly, they don't really keep their word, like this won't really function for a long time, because at some point like people will flag this, and yeah.
Okay. Sounds super interesting. I think people are going to really, hopefully you won't get more applications after this, but you might after, so that's always good to have more choice, I suppose. So we're almost at the end, but I've got a couple more questions that I want to ask about, because you've mentioned this before, which is, you've separated your home and your work life by going to a co-working space. And you've also, in some articles that I read, it says that you really encourage people to have deep focus at work and manage their own interruptions. So there is, and you said something really interesting, which was, when I worked at home or when I was working in my own apartment, I tended to overwork all the time, instead of, it's sort of because life and work was blended, and then you just tend to overwork. Because I think that's really interesting, because so many managers are afraid to let people go remote because they think they're going to be lazy. And I see over and over again that the opposite is true. People tend to overwork. How do you manage, like in your company and maybe for yourself, that whole always on feeling? Because you're the CEO, right? Like everybody wants your attention. So I can imagine you've got messages and stuff coming at you all over the place. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like it's really, really difficult, I think, to do that, especially like in our environment. But like creating like separation, like physical separation between like the workspace and like your home space is really powerful. Or even like having a specific room inside your house where you work, and then when you're there you work, and when you're outside, you're at home. That can also work. So I think that's like really important component, and also for me that's critical. And then also like having, I think, like for us, I mean, that's why like I care so much about asynchronous communication, because I think it's like kind of a like antidote to actually this always on culture, because you can kind of disconnect without like missing out. You know, like I can kind of like disconnect after this call and not really look at any messages. And I wake up in the morning and I go to work, and like nobody will actually be blocked because I didn't, you know, respond right away. Because like the whole system is kind of built that, you know, you have like different like response times, and people don't really require you to respond right away. Of
Right.
course, like you have sometimes like emergencies, but like emergencies are kind of like, you know, the one-off. So people, you know, have my phone number, they can actually call me. Like I think the last call I got like was 2 years ago because like something crashed or something like that.
Right.
But the thing is, like, people kind of use this as the default way of communicating. So I think actually, like, if we move away from like real time, you know, disruptive communication, and we move to like asynchronous, where you basically, you know, have like more space and time to actually respond and like control when you're going to respond, I think we'll be like much happier. Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with it myself. It's just, I have a rule, like I don't work before 9 a.m. and after 9 p.m. in my own time zone. That's sort of a rule that my husband made me set for myself. But I must admit that I'm way happier putting those boundaries. And like, I don't check social media or email or anything. I really like just turn off and do other stuff. And it has helped. And I've separated my office in my house. And that also helped. You're right. It's not necessary, but it's really powerful. Because like this is the only room in which I work, and I don't do any work anywhere else. And it does really help me keep my boundaries. So yeah, thanks for sharing your tips. I think that really helps. So second to the last question, last one's really easy. Second to the last question though is, what would you suggest for people who are just starting out on the remote working journey? What, either as a person or as a company, whatever tip, whatever angle you want to take, what would you advise people who are just starting out? What should they pay attention to for a newcomer?
I would actually like really recommend that they go in and work from a co-working space, and, you know, get like some colleagues that are maybe also remote. Like, I mean, there's some like really, really cool co-working spaces, at least like in Barcelona where I live. But I think like everywhere, maybe they are like kind of being created. And that can
Yeah.
kind of like create an environment, and like also do the separation thing, like between home and work. And then you can also have some colleagues that you can share with, so it doesn't really become like very lonely. Yeah, so like in my co-working space, you know, I do like gym sessions, and like I play squash with the you know, it's kind of co-workers, but we don't really work on the same company. Like we do lunches as well, so it's really, really great, and I can definitely recommend that, even though like you will need to pay a bit more for that. And even like a lot of remote companies actually have this as a perk, like including us, where we just like pay for co-working space of people.
That is a nice perk. So why did you guys decide to give that perk?
Because I think like actually one of the biggest struggles that you have as a new remote worker is kind of loneliness. Like if you're used to work from an office environment and have like people around you and like people you can chit chat with, like just like going cold turkey and like work from your home, like that is pretty brutal change. Yeah.
That's true. It is really brutal. All of a sudden you're alone in your room. You get as many video calls as you want, but it's not the same as hanging out with Joe, Bob, and Harry at the office. Yeah, for sure. All right. And so very last question, I promise, which is, if people want to learn more about you, what's the best place online to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter for sure. Like my Twitter handle is amix3k. So that is one thing. And then we also have like an amazing blog where we go into like remote work, like productivity, you know, team communication, a lot of other like things around that topic. So it's basically Doist blog. Yeah. And we have shared like hundreds of articles on like best practices, like what have we ever learned like over the last 10 years doing this. Yeah.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes too. And I can definitely highly recommend your blog, because there's a lot of really good articles coming there. I see them on social media all the time. So you guys have done a really good job in terms of the depth of the content, and then also in terms of the marketing and getting it out. It's really everywhere. So kudos to you. Kudos for that. Thank you so much, Amir, for being here today and for sharing your stories. I hope that this has been valuable for the people listening. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure and some really good questions. And I hope, people can take something out of this.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. Look, I took tons of notes so people can, if I took tons of notes, then others are taking tons of notes too. All right. So thanks again. And for everybody listening, until next time, be powerful.